I'll get it going.
I was just going to start by saying thank you for everyone for coming. We just kind of wanted to provide this opportunity for you guys as juniors, because I know there's a lot on everyone's mind with the whole junior year and thinking ahead and planning. And with the current times, a lot of things are changing and evolving. So today we're kind of focusing on kind of, SAT, ACT, college kind of prep questions for four-year college. We are going to meet individually with every single junior. So as counselors, we'll meet with our part of our caseload and meet with you guys individually coming up here in the spring. So just to kind of make sure you're on track with plans and kind of set up with what you need to do and kind of going into this summer and next year, and then get some good information out there for you guys to explore. So today was more just to kind of a starting point, I guess, and just kind of trying to answer your questions where you're at, and we'll do the best we can. I don't know, Ms. Jelly,
Yeah.
want to add to that?
No, that's great. I was just going to ask everyone to mute themselves just because it's a big group. And I think that'll make it easier for everyone to be able to hear. And then we have, thank you. And then we have the chat open to us, just so it doesn't get distracting. And if you want to message us at any time, please do that. And if we don't see it, we'll try to get back through the chat. We'll try and take turns kind of monitoring that. But if there's questions that are coming up for you that we're not addressing, because this is really time for you and we don't know yet kind of what questions are brewing. We have some ideas and we're going to go over some information that's pretty specific to four-year college. So I just want to give you, that heads up. But we also, if that is, if there's questions that you have about kind of planning forward, as Mr. Vandermolen said, we're going to be connecting with you for registration, connecting with you for junior meetings this spring. So there's other opportunities to keep talking about your personal pathway. So it's really good to see you all. Yeah.
Alrighty,
So
well, should we get started with the PowerPoint?
Let's do it.
Okie dokie. I will pull it up.
And we're just going to go. We're just going to go through a few.
With that instead. We're good.
Oh, hey, Marcus.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It happens to all of us. So we're just going to go through some slides because we have been getting emails that are consistent between some of our juniors. And we thought it might be easiest if we just address some of those up front. And we're going to, the first slide, actually, Michelle, if you go to it, is we'd love to see what's on your mind. So I know the chat will come to us, but if you could just take a sec and put in the chat, like, what are the questions that are kind of burning for you right now? What are the things that are bringing you anxiety about planning forward? What are some of the things you hope we covered today? And if we aren't able to get to everyone's questions, we will try to divide up and follow up with you. But we just love to get a pulse on, what are some of the questions that are coming up for you? So just take a second and we'd love to just see if we're we've got some ideas because we've had lots of emails, like I said, and if we don't get any, we'll just move through. Okay, the chat's open. So as yes, we'll talk about that. Oh, here they come. Okay. Yes. Okay. These are great questions. I have to say, and I'm just speaking for myself, there are things I'm learning every day that we may not have all the answers. Oops, it's going through.
All right.
We're flying.
I meant to go back.
So yeah, so there's a lot of questions around SAT and ACT. That's great. And we're going to talk about that. And some of the questions, like I said, we made between the three of us, we might have to get back to you on that. Okay. So let's go forward because that's kind of some of the questions we've been getting through email too. Perfect. Okay. Great question. Okay. So we can just kind of popcorn on these counselors, but here's what we know right now in real time. So what we've heard is that we're not going to be able to offer the PSAT this year to juniors. That's typically given in the fall. in the Bellingham Public Schools, and we've, it was pushed to January. It was talked about for March, but it looks like realistically, since it's offered as something called arena scheduling, where we bring everybody in to sit at tests or sit at desks and take the test, or tables, it's not going to happen because we can't do that safely. So we know that's a disappointment for many people who wanted to take that as a practice. What we typically recommend for students looking at four-year colleges is to take an SAT or an ACT. And we can, depending on what questions you have about those, we can talk a little bit more about those tests. Take one of those in the spring if you're able, because it is lower pressure. You can get your results back and you have the summer to consider taking it again in the fall. And typically students take it more than once. So in essence, you can take it as a practice, in the sense like you can prep for it or not and get a baseline and see where you want to go from there. And if you want to try both tests, you can do that and see if one's a better fit for you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of trends in colleges, because there also has been a shift, obviously, this past year away from the SAT or ACT being required for some students. And that's going to be interesting to watch over the next year, how that shifts for some colleges. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add on top of that too. I know there's sometimes this feeling of a lot of pressure that you have to do all this prep before the first time you take it. So kind of like Ms. Schutt said, like, I think even if you just like got on there and got familiar with the types of questions and spent an hour getting on and just kind of seeing what it looks like and do a tiny bit of review before the first time you take it. Everyone's going to be in different places in time, space, and energy, especially now because we're, with the online world. So I just don't think that should be a pressure point because, that sometimes can be. So that's one thing to just mention too.
Really quickly, I think there's, just to kind of go back to really like the what is a college admissions test. So both of these are tests that some schools, four-year schools will require as part of the admission process. So if you're considering maybe doing a community college or a two-year school and transferring to a four-year, you may need to take it, you may not. So every school is a little bit different. And you only need to take one of these tests. You can take both. That's totally up to you, but it's not required. So I know a lot of students took the ACT, the practice ACT, I believe. Did we get that last year? Some students might have been able to do that. So you might feel more comfortable with the SAT, and that's okay. So you don't need to take both. And that's a good conversation you can have with your counselor about strengths and weaknesses and the differences between the two tests. Colleges accept them both. So you do not need to take both of them, just one.
Both equally. One is not better than the other, just so you know, whichever fits better for you.
Yep.
And you'll notice I on this slide, there's a couple changes the SAT is making. They are not going to change the essay, I think, is still available. If people signed up for the essay already, say for a March test, or have signed up for June test, they're not going to yank that option away. But starting for the fall and the spring, there's no subject tests. They're just finding students are taking more AP tests and exams, and there's other ways for them to demonstrate that through their transcript and other methods besides subject tests. They're using AP scores, and so the subject tests are going away. Those were only required for some pretty specific selective schools anyway. But the essay is a big change. So after this spring, this June, they won't be offering the essay anymore as part of the SAT. So I had a question in the chat about what is the format of the test? Has that changed? They're not doing virtual testing for SAT. So in the next slide, we're going to show some dates for the spring, and Western is our closest test site. That's really convenient for many students. And right now, as of now, the March test is on. I should have checked. Has anyone checked about the February ACT? It's too late to sign up for that. One's coming up really quick. Yeah. But I wonder if it's being offered is what I was getting at. But so what happens is, and what happened this past year is, if you signed up at Western to take, say, the March 13th test, and for some reason they cancel that because they have too many people enrolled and they can't spread them out safely, or they just aren't able to get students on campus, then they're going to notify you. They're going to either refund you or you can push your money to a future test date. So some of our students last year experienced this multiple times, you know, maybe 3-4 times before they were like, okay, my school doesn't require it. I'm not taking it. It's just didn't happen during COVID. So right now, these spring dates are on for Western. So you could sign up if you wanted to, knowing that if they cancel it, they will offer you a refund or they'll allow you to push it to a future date.
And a question that's coming up in the chat quite often is, how do I know whether to take the ACT or the SAT? Typically, like you took the pre-ACT, so you have those results. You took those sophomore year, you kind of got an example, and typically you would have taken the PSAT in the fall this year and kind of have an idea of both tests. So my suggestion would be what I suggest to students is to go on to each of the websites, act.org and collegeboard.org, and check out just the format of each test, and the types of questions. Just spend, half hour even just going on there and just peeking at one practice test for one practice test for the other. And you can kind of just see like which format and which question types may you kind of like the look of better, in terms of taking, and then that can be kind of a way to evaluate that. Again, that one is not better than the other. So, some students focus strictly on one test and just say, I'm just going to focus in on the SAT and take it once, see how I do, take it again. And that's totally fine. Some decide they want to try one of each. And again, doesn't mean you need to, it's just a space-time thing. But that's one strategy, I guess I would say, in terms of determining which one. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they have options too for getting it yourself emailed a question of day. And so some students like to sign up for that and just kind of pick away at looking at questions over time instead of, just casually, and kind of familiarize themselves with types of questions.
Historically, last thing I'll say too is historically, like SAT, a lot of times you hear more about the SAT in our area because historically, like West and East Coast has more been SAT focused, and the middle has been ACT, but over time it's become kind of either one. So again, I just want to emphasize that either test is fine.
Yeah, and then I'm getting a couple questions about test blind and test optional, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. So the SAT, actually, just really quickly, there are fee waivers available for any students that would qualify for free or reduced lunch, or even if you feel like you are in need right now. Things are so, this has been such a year. So just email us if you are, I think the test is about $65. Is that accurate if it's full pay? Someone can check me. I'm not sure if that's changing without the essay. Someone can fact check me on that, somewhere around there. But we do have fee waivers that we can help you with for both tests. So just reach out to your counselor and we'll talk with you about that.
I think it's about 50 without the essay, like 47, 58 or something.
Perfect.
And also these are the spring dates. So this is, again, like was mentioned earlier, there is like an August date over the summer, kind of that some students, access, and then you can actually take it in the fall too, second time, or if you feel like you're just not ready this spring, you could do it in August or the fall.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
There was one question, I think, just if you're planning to do a community college first. So there's the option to do 2 years at a community college and get a transfer degree to a 4-year school. That would mean you do not need to take it right now. So it's not an admission requirement for community colleges or technical colleges. So when you apply to the 4-year school down the road, some schools would require that. So you would want to take that the spring before you apply. So not this year. I mean, you could if you wanted to just, get a baseline, but you would more than likely take it later when you're applying for that 4-year school, the spring before you apply.
Okay, I think the next slide, we've got some information about test optional and test blind. So here's the trend. So the class of 2021, so this current senior class, many schools are test optional or test blind, and because of the year that we're coming off of. And so we put some links here, and we're happy to email this out to you all, for an organization called Fair Test that has updated lists on schools that are test optional and then schools that are test blind. When I was looking at it yesterday, what I noticed is many are test optional, some are test blind for class of 2021. Some have extended it to 2022, 2023, but it's really important for your year. You're in this transition year. We'll see what the spring holds. If you know, test sites are not readily available, I have a feeling they're going to continue that trend longer. But we can't promise anything for your class. You know, we're in that transition of vaccines coming, things starting to reopen. So what I would say is it's great to educate yourself and get an idea of schools that are test optional. You can see some of them have committed to a longer window beyond this current senior class into your class or beyond. And then some are actually test blind. University of Washington, for example, this year is test blind. They're not even looking at tests if you send them in. And that's good information to know. And so there's a list, those links go to lists of schools. And you can also look them up by state. So if you have a school that you're interested in and want to see what they're doing right now, you can look that up. And of course, on school admission pages, you can always go to their admission page and they're going to have updates. And that's probably the most, you know, once you find a school, it's always good to check on their admission page to make sure that that's the most recent, that's the most updated information.
And I think just to clarify too, so test optional means that school doesn't require you to submit ACT, SAT for admissions. They will consider it if you do submit it. And so you aren't penalized if you don't, but if you feel like it's something that would strengthen your application, then it's something they would look at. Whereas test blind will not like even use it as part of admissions at all. Or, you know, I know like with UW won't use it for merit scholarships or anything, which we can talk about that in a minute. But so that's kind of the difference, just to clarify the meanings of those terms, because I know they're thrown out there a lot.
Yeah. And there are, I do know that some, as Mr. Vandermolen was saying, some schools are using, you know, you want to check the website, especially for your class, check the admission page of your school, because some schools may still want those scores for merit aid. So the money piece. And so that's something we don't want to say if it's test optional. There was a question in the chat about, you know, if it's test optional, should I do it? And it's just something to consider. I would say that, you know, if you're on the fence, it's probably a good idea to attempt one, since unless you know for sure what school and that it won't impact you, you know, financially. So just to keep the door open right now while it's not, you know, high pressure on you to get a test squeezed in the fall or close to the deadline.
And I think a question did come up about the topic of discrimination within standardized testing and what do the tests, is it, you know, are these standardized tests fair in terms of what they measure, and, you know, does it create a balanced playing field for all students in terms of applying to four-year college? And that's a topic that's been wrestled by four-year colleges nationally, and that's actually why a lot of four-year colleges, or some, I should say, I don't want to say a lot just because I don't want to misrepresent, but are shifting to not requiring it, you know, the test optional or the test blind as kind of a response to that. So that's, I think, a piece that's, you know, constantly ongoing and in discussion. And it's more, I think it's more if you, probably the benefit of taking it, you know, regardless of kind of test optional, test blind, or kind of your beliefs around that, is the benefit of taking it probably would be if you want to just have all options available to yourself, right? Like if there's a school that is requiring it, then, and you find that out in the fall, then you don't want to be caught without it. But it also depends kind of how flexible your mindset is about, like, if you have an idea of some schools now and they're all test optional and you don't want to test, then that's your choice based on that. But I don't know, I'm just trying to kind of address, hopefully anyone else has other comments.
Yeah, no, I think it's just an acknowledgement of this is a new time that we're going through for everyone, us included, to help guide you through this, and it's shifting, and that's why we're going to be with you through this whole journey. And but it is just a little bit of a transition time between things being totally shut down and not available and things starting to open up. So we're going to give you, today the best information we know, but we're going to keep updating you as the year goes on, and we'll see how, what the trends are as we head toward the end of the year. So just acknowledging that it is an uncertain time in the sense of like hard to give you like hard and fast information. We're just basing it on what we know right now. Okay.
I'm getting a few questions in the chat just about specific schools. And that's a great question to bring when you're meeting with us during your junior year. We can even just screen share and look at the admissions websites and go onto these websites with you. Also in the past, if you have some concerns or specific questions, I've made calls to the admissions offices with students before too. So know that we're here for you all along the way. And yeah, we might not be able to answer the question right away, but we can at least support you in getting those answers.
Yeah, and I know we recommend the fairtest.org, because that kind of has the updated test optional, and always the safest place to check is the specific college's website, right? Like in terms of their updated policies. So that's a good thing to know too in terms of where they're standing. Because I know, like we talked about, University of Washington for your class has removed the requirement, and then the University of California schools also dropped like the SAT, ACT as a requirement, so they're test optional, and the essay and writing portions aren't required. So that's an example of a couple in state and also in California that's kind of come out in the last few months. Let's see.
Okay.
What else is in the chat?
Yeah, and we just put in a couple links, and again, this is not, I know we're just throwing links up and it's not very helpful in this sort of format, but we're happy to send this after. But I just wanted to say there's some great, one of the things that's happened during COVID is colleges have really improved their game on virtual tours because they really want you to come. They want good students to come to their school. And so it was hit or miss before they have really, if you go to a school's website, they likely have a virtual tour that's pretty in depth, and you might get to go into a dorm. So of course, you're always seeing what they want you, what want you to see, but they are helpful to kind of get an idea of like size of school and what the layout is. And yeah, I'm getting a question about, we'll email this out to you. We'll get this out to 11th graders. So don't worry about trying to save these links. So campustours.com is just one we put in there. It's pretty comprehensive. You can look up a school by title or region, and it'll take you through like a 5-minute tour, but there's also other links from the website that you can do if you want to go more in depth on the school. And then we just we get a lot of questions about kind of where to start with college searching. And there's so many good resources out there, and you have to kind of find, you're all so good with tech. You can look online, and I'm sure, find things that might be a better fit for you personally. We put up Big Future College Board, has a pretty good starting point for college searching, and they have a lot of resources for students and accessing college too. So that's why we chose that one, but there's other good search engines out there for college. And then the Washington Student Achievement Council is an organization for our state that really looks at student access and getting students into their post-secondary occupations and institutions. And so they have, if you're thinking about staying in Washington, they have a great website with tons of information about financial aid, and you can spend a lot of time there. But I just put the link for looking at schools in Washington, and they've got a great way to search for programs and things in Washington state. So those are just some, and I don't know if Ms. Jelt or Mr. Vandermolen want to jump on that at all or have any other ideas or.
I think the Big Future is kind of nice, or those ones, just because you can narrow it down by region, so you can kind of pick if you kind of know. Like I was talking to someone who's like interested in schools in California, so you can put that in and then put in preferences, and at least it gets you started with thinking on the list, you know, if you kind of want to just explore. So that would be one comment, I guess I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I think on the, oh, go ahead, Aim.
Just thinking like at the beginning of next year, also we have, well, traditionally we have reps come into Sehome, and this year we did some virtual opportunities for students. And so if you're still undecided, I would definitely recommend looking on the Career Center website, on the school counseling website. There's it's like on the left-hand side. Ms. Sender does a great job of listing who's coming to visit us, who's coming to check in. And it's a really nice way to have a one-on-one conversation with, most of them are local schools, but if you had another specific school you wanted to connect with, you can always let us know, and we can find ways to connect you with those schools. And sometimes it's nice just to even go listen, even if you're like, I have no idea what is, you know, we had UBC come, right? So, you know, it's right next door, but it is an international school. So there's a few different application processes for them, but just even coming to listen and just getting an idea, you might learn of something new. So yeah, just don't hesitate to check something out. Even if you don't plan on going there, it might give you another idea.
Yeah, sometimes going to visit schools or going to virtual to hear from schools, you start to figure out what you're not looking for too, which is important, right? Like maybe size or location, things like that. On the next slide there, we put one resource for one that's happening this spring. Now this is through College Board, so it's a little broader, but I was looking at it yesterday, and you can go on and register for region. So if you're someone who's like, I really want to go to New England, then you could sign up for the March 7th. And this is of course virtual, and it'll show you the list of colleges that'll be there. And it looks like you can sign up for breakout sessions where you could actually talk to a rep from that college. And probably there's some, you know, info sessions and Zoom sessions where you can go hear from that representative. So as Ms. Jelt was saying, and I will put it, when we send this out, we'll send the link to the Career Center website, because Ms. Sender does such a great job. And there'll be more about that coming up, like Ms. Jelt said, in the fall. This one we just put in because it was just sort of timely with when we were meeting with you. And so if it's something you want to check out, it's not a pressure to do. For some of you, you're like, I feel so overwhelmed. I'm in the bare starting stages. There is no need to feel like you need to go be doing this right now. And some of you are asking for it, so we're just putting it out there. So if you're interested in that, I kind of like this one just because you could sign up for region, although the West it's a pretty big region here on the half of the United States. But for some students, you know, maybe you're interested, you have family in the South and you're interested in going there, or Midwest. So that's just an opportunity. And like I said, we'll send this out after.
There's a few questions in the chat. Maybe I'll address too before we move forward, if that's okay.
Sure.
So one question, just to clarify too, is SAT and ACT, just to go back to that real quick, isn't done through the school at all, like through Sehome. So you sign up on those sites, and then you go take the tests at a local test center on a Saturday morning, and then you decide where you want your scores sent to. Like that's something you actually can have them, you know, you can choose schools to send them to for free the day of the test or when you sign up online, but a lot of students wait till they see how they do before they send them. So that's just a piece. And you do want to, like, if there's a registration deadline, you don't want to wait all the way up to the deadline, because if you kind of know a time frame when you want to test, it's good to sign up earlier, because then you can get a spot at a local test center. Because if Western has so many spots and then they fill up, then the closest test center might move to Ferndale, or, you know, for example, or Linden or whatever. So that's kind of how that works. You sign up specifically on the websites, ACT and College Board. Another student asked about like how important the essay is. This is something I think continues to evolve too, because I think before I would always say, oh, take the essay just in case the college would want it. I'd recommend to take the essay. And now the SAT is moving away from the essay in terms of as part of the test. So it's kind of like we're in this in-between phase. So I guess I would say, you know, if you're signed up and want to take it, you know, go for it and do your best. It's another measure. But if you feel like, you know, that, I don't know if Ms. Jelt or Ms. Schultz have read more just recently, but
Yeah, it sounds like they're discontinuing it after June. So, and their rationale on their website was that they just felt that most schools provide an opportunity for a student to demonstrate their writing through their essays, but also, they're doing some of that evaluative work through, transcripts and AP scores, and they just felt like there are other comprehensive ways rather than a timed write. Like it might not be the best way to assess.
Yeah.
For application.
And another question that came up is if I wanted to get a refund for, or something like that, something always contact College Board or ACT, like go on the site and contact them directly if you have an issue with a date or like removing the essay or something. Let me just see, sorry.
It sounds like they are doing refunds for the essay portion this year since they're changing.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes there is a change fee when you're having just, if you want to just choose a different date, but if it gets canceled, you'd basically have a credit and you'd be able to sign up for another one. So, or if you wanted to just say, okay, well, I'm not going to take it, then you would just contact them about the refund.
Yeah, and keep an eye on your email and just contact info like leading up to the test, because if a test center due to COVID, like if they have had to cancel sometimes kind of late, so just know that. Another question that came up is if I apply to go to a school directly out of high school, like a four-year college, and didn't get in, could I go to a two-year college and then transfer in and still have a chance to get into that same school? And yes, like you can even reapply. Like you could go to community college for a year and say you do really well for that year and want to reapply to the 4-year after 1 year, you could do that. You also could go to a community college for 2 years, complete your what's called the AA degree, which is your 2-year degree. And then they have what's called direct transfer agreements into 4-year colleges, especially if it's in state, where if you meet certain requirements, then you have a good chance of getting into the major that you're looking at the 4-year college. And then you do your last 2 years, in your major at the 4-year college. So those are things we can talk with you more about, but those are definitely possibilities. So those are a couple chats.
And just on that topic, one thing I've noticed for a lot of students that have come up more recently are community colleges are awesome. They're really a great opportunity to be able to, not, lower the cost of your overall college tuition, to have smaller class sizes, to potentially be able to live closer to home if you wanted to stick around here and transfer. One thing that's really important though is if you're interested in if I want to be blank. I just had a question in the chat about becoming an architect. One thing that's really important is to look at the programs that are at the schools you're interested in. So for instance, if you wanted to be an architect at Washington State University, they do have a 4-year program. So even if you did 2 years, it's not necessarily going to help because you'll still have to jump in the cohort model. I feel like what I just said was like a lot of jargon. So if that didn't make any sense, basically just making sure you're looking into the specific programs at the 4-year, talk to us, talk to the people at the community colleges to make sure that that's actually giving you that advantage of the 2 years. And some people change their mind, right? So I think the idea of graduating college in 4 years is awesome. That's great. And a lot of people take way more than that. Some people take 5 years, some people take 6 years, and that is also absolutely okay. Obviously, keeping in mind the cost, but just reach out to us if you have any specific questions on that transfer because it can get complicated.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the average college student changes their major 3 or more times in college. So it's not like there's a lower likelihood that the thing you choose to be right now is going to stay the same. It's most likely going to change. So have an open mind in terms of not being stuck with that one idea, and be open to changes throughout your life, I guess.
Yeah, and to follow up on that too, that's a good point, because I've also had students who, over the years, not a lot, but a few, who've honed in on one specific major at a college that specializes in that. And then they went there and then they changed their mind. And then it didn't have like a couple of the secondary majors So that's a good thing to think about when you're searching too, is like, this is the one I really want to do. And then what are a couple other maybe backup possibilities? And does the school also have that? So that way you're kind of set up either way. Another quick question in the chat before I forget, because it's a ways back, and I want to acknowledge it, is how would you recommend preparing for SAT or ACT, resources for studying books, etc.? I'm a big believer in free prep. So if you go on College Board, they connect you up with something called Khan Academy, which has like all the free practice you want in terms of practice questions, free full practice tests. So that's a really good resource. And then ACT.org has free prep on their website too. So those are good places to start. There are books out there. Some people like getting a book and just kind of working on areas they want, if you are someone that wants to do prep. And that's also the benefit of taking it the first time, is you kind of see what areas you may want to work on a little more. And then some students do that, and that's when they kind of hone in on what they want to prep on. So just want to answer that question too.
So how are we doing out there? What are some questions that are still on your mind? Anything that we didn't cover that I know I'm not always great about checking my chat. I was trying to do that, but if there's something that I didn't get to or we didn't get to.
There's a question about some people, there's those, kind of really thick books that you can get that's a couple years old. Is that still applicable? I mean, I think that basically as we've been kind of talking, studying for this test is a bit challenging, because there's not really a specific, really, like study this and you'll get this question on the test and you'll get the right answer. It's more of, I think, practicing the flow of the test. So that one, I mean, I would say if it's a couple years old, that's still the same format that they're using, at least without the essay. So being able to like look at what do the test questions look like? How are they? What are the sections? Those sorts of things. That would be still really helpful. I don't know if you guys have other thoughts on that.
No, I was just going to say the same. I think it's practicing the type of questions and how they're presented, so you don't have to spend so much time figuring out directions during the test, and also understanding what the different sections of the test are and what kind of math will be covered, for example. Sometimes it's reviewing math you haven't seen in a while and just how they present it so that you can show what you know. So yeah, familiarizing yourself, and then taking some practice test sections timed. I think sometimes that's something students struggle with, is the timed aspect of a test. So, if you have an opportunity to take a section, practice section where you can actually set a timer and kind of see if you're getting through the questions on time, or sort of figure out how many questions, kind of the pacing of the test, I think that can be helpful. So it's not so stressful. And I just got another question about the cost of the test. And so sounds like it's about $50 without the essay, but we have fee waivers for students who might qualify. And you can reach out to your counselor with that question.
I'd also just like, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to just address the whole, just like the big picture of everything. Thinking about, I know a lot of people are thinking like, okay, well, I'm 4-year college, it's what I want to do. I'm not really sure what I want to do, but I know that's what I want to do, right? So and that's a really good conversation to be having, exploring different ideas with your friends, your family, your counselors, your teachers, mentors, just, because it's a great goal, I think, to want to continue your education. And I think it's also just important to kind of have, now is the time that you get to find out different options. Maybe this year that's your goal and you're preparing for it, and then you get to senior year and you decide, actually, I think it'd be really cool to do an apprenticeship with an electrician, and I really am interested in like building houses and things like that. Maybe you'll change your mind. So I think just keeping an open mind, there are a lot more options out there than I think you might be exposed to. So that's a really good thing just to share with maybe someone that you're like, I really like their lifestyle. Maybe they're an artist and they travel a lot or whatever it is that you're interested in, and then just talking to people about, well, what did you do? How did that work? And just recognizing that there's so many different ways to reach goals, not just one way. So
yeah, and I was thinking after this, we can send this PowerPoint out. But I was thinking we'll talk as a counseling team. I think we have a email that we sent to last year's juniors with links to all different resources for apprenticeship, for students interested in 2-year and technical college programs. And so we can put something together and send it to you along with this PowerPoint so that, there's no pressure to be working on this or looking at it right now, but it's there for you as a tool. And then if you want, when we meet in the spring or when we're meeting for registration, some of the, if questions or more specifically to you, we'd love to talk to you about that and kind of help you with your planning. So.
And I'd say too, the other part, some people have asked, I've gotten questions about like what's most important for preparing right now. And I think if you are looking at four-year college, obviously continue doing your best in school. Like that's the number one thing, and obviously I know everyone's doing that and we're all working through this online piece. You guys are working really hard. So that's probably the number one thing. And then if you feel like you can do a spring SAT or ACT, like we talked about today. And then I think just like we talked about exploring and having conversations and doing a little research here and there in terms of like, because you know yourself best, kind of like, continuing to do that. Those are kind of the key things for this spring, and I don't know if Ms. Delt or Ms. Schutz want to add to that, but those are kind of my thoughts.
No, I was just going to say that colleges are continuing to reach out to us to say, we know that this is hard. We know that students are in all different situations right now. They're really trying to do holistic reviews and offer opportunities for students to talk about their experiences during this time because, transcripts look different around the nation right now. Grading scales are different. So colleges are trying to adapt and figure out how to create opportunities for students, keep the doors open, and also grab these wonderful students. And so that's what we're hearing from colleges. We just want you to know that. And then also when we send your transcript, we always send to something called if your school is asking for it, we always send a school profile. And that's always available for schools to look at too on our website. And what that does is we have a section in there around COVID and, what did last spring look like? What does this year look like for our students? What are the grading options? So was school remote or in person? Because different around the nation, school districts are in different situations. So they're going to know that you were remote until you're not. They're going to know that if we're back, hybrid, that you went back hybrid. We're going to share that as much as possible with colleges. And so just keep that in mind too. You're not isolated in this as a shared experience, but it's different for everyone. And so colleges are really trying to open up opportunities to find out like what's happening in our district, what's happening with students when they apply.
Yeah, and the other part too is obviously the extracurriculars, which I know is really challenging because you guys are missing out on those in different ways. And so just know that again, some people are worried or stressed about how that will impact their college application. And those are things where colleges, every conversation we've had with them, like they're going to take into context everyone's situation based on where they're at, right? Because different parts of the country have different opportunities. So that goes back against to every college's goal is to give, that opportunity to evaluate fairly and equitably. So that's always the goal, in terms of just knowing that. And then someone in the chat did ask about class rank, and class rank, we no longer have class rank in our district, and that was a district decision. And can just reassure everyone that won't penalize you at all in terms of applying to four-year colleges, because part of what went into that decision as a district was gathering feedback and info from four-year colleges nationally. And so they have their own evaluation process. So for districts and schools that don't rank around the country and kind of in the same way. So just to let you guys know that too. So that doesn't show up in Skyward anymore in terms of the rank piece.
And I guess in general, I'd say that most colleges, if you have a GPA above a certain point, they won't care how high that is, as long as it's above that certain point. If it's some colleges may, but again, it's not about having the highest GPA. It's about being above the level that they set, and that's usually not especially difficult because that's, I mean, depending on the college, of course. But if as long as you're above that, it doesn't matter how high. You don't have to have a 4.0 to get into every single best school in the world. But yeah, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Timing.
Yeah,
And
that's
that was
great.
another thing too I read last night about like um, why would you want to take an SAT or ACT if it's test optional? And again, going back to that, I think some of it depends on how strong you feel as a test taker, and if it's at something that you feel like enhances who you are and you want to show that. If and if you feel like that's you can test well and based on the middle 50% averages, then that can enhance. But if you feel like that's not going to be an advantage for you, then that's something to consider too. And maybe, because you can still test and not submit your scores to test optional, right? Like you can take it, not to send them to test optional. So those are just things to think about.
Yeah, and I think just going off that last comment, which was just so great, is that there are so many great schools out there because they're a great fit for you. And oftentimes we hear about a certain kind of high tier run. When we're thinking 4-year, we kind of hear these names pop up, and we know that the selective schools will probably stay selective. And there are so many great schools for a variety of options for students because of what they're interested in studying, because of where they're located, because of some of the extracurriculars and opportunities that they have for students. So, that might be the best school for you, even if it's not on that list, right? So I really do want to jump on that it's important to be thinking, as you explore, just remember there are so many schools with, that are very, very open to many of our students. And it's just, continuing to explore and tell us, share with us what you're interested in. We're not, it's one of our hats we wear. And I always say to my students, I don't always have the answers for college, when they ask me like, where should I, this major, what should I? And so, but we're always happy to research with you and make phone calls and look at the resources that we have available to try and help with that search. So
I guess don't go to a school because it's a big name school. Go to a school because you're going to have the tools necessary to help yourself become a better person and then help others in your occupation in the future to go out and change stuff. So that should be your goal. Not your goal should not be ever to go to the richest school or go to the best school that has all these best things because it has this name. That's not how schools are good. Schools are good because you're there and your personality is adding to the school itself.
Yeah, that's a great point, Timming. And it's really about the best fit, right? Like, and I use Montana State sometimes as an example too, because we have a good chunk of students that attend there because it's kind of has some similar features to Bellingham. They want to get away from home, and kind of has the outdoor activities. And it's a great school, has great programs. And Montana State like doesn't get as many applicants. So in terms of the selectivity to get in is kind of misleading because it's not this super high rated in terms of getting in, tough to get in, but it's a fantastic school more because it's not going to get as many applicants. So it's a little misleading. So again, we have students go there because it's just a great fit based on their interests in engineering or music or, that sort of thing. And it fits where they want to live and the activities they want to get involved in. So it's the best fit. So that's just an example of one, not to sell Montana State, but just want to throw that one out there.
So if students have more questions, we're willing, we can hang out for a few more minutes. But we know that was a long presentation. We've recorded that and we'll be able to send you these resources after. Might take us a couple days to get them out, but we'll get something out to our juniors with some kind of exploration pieces and some of the resources we talked about. And as always, just reach out to us. We love hearing from you. Many of you do already, but please do reach out. We know that we've been remote since you were in 10th grade, and that's another thing we want to acknowledge, that here we are going through junior year and talking about applying to colleges. And what a strange year this and journey this has been. And you are amazing. You're amazing for showing up today and asking great questions. And you're continuing
Yes.
to be resilient. And we will be here with you through this journey. So do reach out to us if we can do anything to help.
And one last thing, someone did comment, one more chat thing, sorry.
Yeah.
Someone did chat about the ACT 8s that we had on the PowerPoint, maybe being different than the ones we sent out in the Skyward email. So we'll double check. I looked on the website and, we'll get that fixed. Just so you
yeah.
know, and on the website, you can get the ones for sure. So you know.
Oh, right.
Sorry about that.
No, I might have done the slide wrong. I was copying it from an email from someone, so it could have been we'll fact check it before we email it to you.
So appreciate you all. And like you said, reach out to us, whoever your counselor is, if you want to have and I just had like a Zoom meeting with someone yesterday, had this great, discussion too. So if you ever want to do that, we love to do that too. So just know we're here to support you in whatever way is helpful, right? That's the key. So
Thanks for coming.
So
We
thanks
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for joining us
Yeah.
on your asynchronous
Thank you so
Wednesday.
much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
hopefully
Bye.
Bye.
bye guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You too.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Timing,
Thanks,
for the great
Timing.
comments. That was awesome.
No problem. Anytime.
Love your perspective.
Thanks. It's actually, some of that's my dad's. He's talks to me a lot about those statistics, so they're kind of in my brain a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
so right about looking for a good fit and reaching for what you need for your school. Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. See you, Timmy.
Any final questions?